Well, I hope I don't offend anybody who's listening who works for the county, but the county job, your work is pretty much done for you as a lawyer. The laws are really swayed towards the side of the county so that, for example, if you want to get in hearsay evidence, you just grab a stapler and staple that evidence onto a report, and it will most likely, usually, 99.9% of the time come in. If you're on the other side of the table and you have something pertinent that the court really should be hearing, but it's, a letter maybe from somebody, it's hearsay. And you don't have all the exceptions that the county has.
And I am the host of two shows, the reality series, CPS the Horror Stories, and Meet the CPS Defense Experts, Advocates, and Attorneys. And that's where you fall under, Denise. And then we have attorney Vince Davis. Vince, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Vince Davis. I'm an attorney. My primary area of practice is representing parents and relatives in CPS cases.
Then Denise, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Denise Bodon. I am an attorney, and my primary area of practice is representing parents and relatives as well in the juvenile dependency courts. And I also do a fair amount of custody and family law cases.
Okay, awesome. Now, how did you get started?
I actually fell in love with dependency when I was in law school. I did an internship, and it was in the LA County courts back in the old days. They had us all shoved in this building downtown, and I represented some children through the Public Council of Los Angeles. And I kind of loved it. I was very addicted to it. I didn't want any other job, and I graduated and passed the bar. And I came to San Diego, and I got hired by the county council. So I represented the social workers for the first part of my career. Did that for many years, and then it kind of slowly mutated to switching to the other side. I've been doing it for 30 years now.
Wow.
Where'd you go to law school, Denise?
I went to Loyola. Isn't that your alma mater?
It is. What year did you graduate?
I graduated in, do I have to say? Let's see. Let's say I passed the bar in 1990.
Okay, so we weren't there at the same time.
Yeah, I think you're a little ahead of me.
When you did that intern for juvenile dependency, you were at the criminal courts building?
Yeah, it was the criminal building.
Interesting.
And I believe they had it on the 12th floor. And back in those days, they just had all these kids piling in the elevators, going up with all the public and everybody else that was in the criminal courts building. And they just sit in hallways for hours and hours and hours.
Right. When I first started dependency practice, I started in the criminal courts building. Seems like 1980 something, I can't remember. But we were in the criminal courts building, and then the criminal courts got upset that there were so many juvenile dependency courts in that building. So they sent half of the juvenile dependency cases to Van Nuys. And I was in the group that went to Van Nuys. And, the other half stayed in downtown LA in the criminal courts building.
Yeah. And
then eventually, they raised the money or got the money to build the building in Monterey Park where all the dependency cases are held, or at least most of them are held today.
And it's interesting, they still don't have satellite courthouses. So people have to travel up to 2-3 hours in traffic.
They have a couple courts, I think 3 or 4 courts now in Lancaster that services the Antelope Valley. But other areas, everyone has to take the long drive to Monterey Park.
Yeah, it's rough.
Your county in San Diego has several dependency, well, has like about 3 dependency courts, right?
We've got 3 open now. We had 4, but they closed the South Bay court.
Right.
I'm not really sure why. I think it wasn't getting the volume, and they just pushed that back over to the Midway. But yeah, there's a for the North County. There's one for the East County. Then there's the Meadowlark, and that's kind of the central.
Mm-hmm.
And they're running 3 or 4 courtrooms there.
Tell us why you became county counsel and why you left.
Well, I'm not sure why I became a county counsel. I think that was the obvious thing to do when I had loans to pay off. I needed a good steady paycheck. And, you know, when you get out of law school, you have these ideas about being a prosecutor maybe, and, you know, dreams about climbing that ladder. And like I said, I was really interested in law to do with children and child abuse. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I applied to one job, I got that job, and I stayed there for a long time. And I really did love it. I mean, it was a bunch of dedicated, hardworking professionals. I made a lot of good friends there. I certainly learned a lot. But it's pretty grueling work, as you know, Vince. It's pretty intense. And I was just married. I was having my first babies. And, to be perfectly honest, when you're doing trials involving the death of children sometimes, and some very ugly fact patterns, I felt I needed to take a step back while I was having my young children. So I did, and I also wanted to be home with them. So I pulled back, and then I started back again part-time. And as that went forward, I started my own practice. And once I started my own practice, well, then the cases started coming in with parents that are calling me, or grandparents, or the court was appointing me as minors counsel. And so I got to sit in a different chair at the table. And surprisingly, I found that, just as interesting, if not, it's certainly more challenging. And then I just continued doing that. It's very different when you're at the other side of the county.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I can't imagine. So let me ask you, what are the biggest difference working for the CPS side and then working for family side?
Well, I hope I don't offend anybody who's listening who works for the county, but the county job, your work is pretty much done for you as a lawyer. The laws are really swayed towards the side of the county, so that, for example, if you want to get in hearsay evidence, you just grab a stapler and staple that evidence onto a report, and it will most likely, usually, 99.9% of the time, come in. If you're on the other side of the table and you have something pertinent that the court really should be hearing, but it's, a letter maybe from somebody, it's hearsay. And you don't have all the exceptions that the county has. So you have to fight harder, really, to get in every piece of evidence that you're putting in. Wow. So it's like the difference between, having to really practice law and meet all those challenges and all those objections versus you just put in a bunch of your side of the case and then sit back and see what the defense has. So I don't mean to disparage them, certainly in the heat of a really, contested trial, they're doing their work. And if we do our jobs right, we're making it really hard for them. So they're competent and they're good lawyers, but the laws are set up so that their presentation of the case is easier and more of their evidence comes in. So that's the biggest difference as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
What's your most interesting case you've done as a parent's or relative's attorney?
Oh, you're not going to believe this. I actually keep a list of the most interesting cases because we see some of the most wild things that you just can't believe. Oh gosh. I mean, they're from the absurd. I saw a case where literally the petition was framed because the mother was kind of a messy person, and the allegation was that all she fed her son was cheese. And that really was what was in the allegation, that was her great neglect. And so I call that the cheese case. And there are some that are like that you win and you have a quick success on. And then there are others that are, incredibly troubling and very complicated. So off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. I'll send you my list later. You'll remember half of them.
Vince, were you going to say something?
I was thinking about interesting cases. Can I ask you about your most interesting case as a representative of a parent or family member? Any interesting cases when you were a county counsel and representing the social workers?
Oh, sure. I had a lot of interesting cases. I mean, one kind of stands out in my mind that I do go back to a lot, and it was the facts were really horrific. If there are young kids listening, you might want to turn down the volume. It was a relative household that had taken in their niece and nephew, maybe, young kids that they brought into their home, and they tortured them and they eventually died. And so the remaining siblings were caused to testify in the criminal case against their own parents. And it was a death penalty case. And the county had placed those remaining siblings, of course, they took them out of the parents' home because the parents were in jail. And they were placed in foster care. And those little kids, they were adorable. They were just 7 or 8 years old. And we fought very hard to keep them off of the witness stand in the murder trial. And the issue there was really the children, what's in the children's best interest, what are their rights in terms of not being traumatized again. And we got the court to rule that they were unavailable as witnesses and that they could go on with their lives and, go into therapy and heal and not forget, but at least move on from the terrible trauma they had experienced. I had another case with, it was very interesting that the child it was a shaken baby case. And the parents were, of course, in this case, they were accused of doing it. And the baby was in a coma, sadly, and was not going to come out of it. And so the hospital wanted to do a do not resuscitate order and let the child pass. But the parents couldn't have that because if they took the child off life support and he passed, well, then they would be guilty of homicide.
Right.
And so that was the battle. And it was, for a lawyer, it was intellectually challenging. For a person and a mom, it was really psychologically and emotionally challenging. And but some really interesting issues come up, and I enjoy that part of it.
Before we go any further, I meant to do this at the beginning, the top of the show. Do me a favor, and a lot of the viewers here on Facebook Live or any other social media outlets that we end up posting this on might want to get in touch with you down in San Diego County. Give us your telephone number where a prospective client could call and get a consultation with you, and your email address. Somebody might want to email you.
Sure, I have. I'll just give you 2 phone numbers. That's really the best. We can use 626-446-6442.
Hold on, let me, sorry, something was in the way. 626?
446
446.
6442.
Okay.
And then you can also reach me at 858 261 2424.
Denise, give us your law firm email.
It's Denise, DENISE, at bodonlaw.com. That's BOHDANLAW.com.
All right. Any Facebook page or website people can go and check out?
I have never done that.
Okay. You know, I know something about you that a lot of people don't know. You have an outside hobby.
I do.
maybe even an outside career. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. Somewhere along the way, I started producing movies, and I have a couple of documentary films that are out and about. And I'm very deep into another one that I'm producing. And the first one was about China and how they cyber spy on everybody. We snuck into Tibet and we took in spy cameras back when the Olympics were in China. And we came with a beautiful, beautiful film about freedom of speech and what's really going on with those very kind and gentle people that are fighting for their freedoms. And then I did another one called The Three Hikers. And these, you can find them on Amazon or Netflix. And The Three Hikers was about the 3 Americans that were jailed in Iran and held as hostages. They were accused of spying. And we worked with their family, following them as their family was campaigning to get them free. And then this last one that I'm doing right now is, it's about the assassination of Robert Kennedy. And that should be out next year.
Oh, very good. Have you ever thought about doing a documentary on CPS?
Yes. I've thought very long and hard about it.
And did you decide one way or the other? Or are you still thinking about it?
I think it's there's a very high likelihood that will be one of my next projects. I think that, honestly, I think that what occurs in the CPS system and what families go through, if it were known by the public at large, they would be appalled. And certainly there are cases that are worthy and are handled correctly, but there's a lot that are not. And yeah, certainly. I think about it all the time. It's one of the reasons I keep my list of cases.
Well, if you ever decide to do that, I would like to be involved.
Me too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Denise, I have a colleague. He's not a lawyer, and he has nothing to do with CPS cases. He has another business, but he had someone follow him around for about 2 years. Not every day, but different parts of the month or whenever the filmer could do it. And after about 2 years, he had enough footage where he put together a movie, a documentary about him, his life, his business. A lot, there were intimate moments at home. There were shots of him out in the public, traveling on an airplane, just all different types of stuff. He entered that movie, he had it professionally edited and, the whole bit. I don't know what you have to do with movies, but he made it into a real movie. And then he entered it into many, many, many film festivals. All over the world.
Yeah.
And I went to a showing of the movie when it was at I didn't even know they had this, but the Palm Springs Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a big party, a dinner, for the premiere and everything. It was like I was at a regular movie. I didn't know there was this whole other life or community of people in film. I thought films were, you just went to the movies and you saw these movies.
Yeah.
But I realized that there were, all types of movies that are made and shown to the public. And now I think he's trying to get the movie on Netflix. And I think he's monetizing it somehow. You know, he never got it into, you know, your local Regent Theater, but,
Sure.
you know, it was still very popular. It got a lot of publicity. And, you know, he's not a household word, but a lot of people, you know, at the, I guess the premiere in Palm Springs were familiar with him and his movie from other, you know,
Sure.
things. What do they call them?
Other festivals, film festivals.
Yeah, other film festivals, right?
I mean, the power of film is pretty great, especially documentary film. So, you know, you have films like the one about the rape in the military that a friend of mine was the editor for. They won Oscars that year, and it was, that film started out with just telling the story of some victims, and that this is a problem and we have to fix it. And it didn't, there was nothing about it that made you think that it was going to make big change. Well, that team ended up advocating for rape victims in the military. I think Obama was in office at that time. That film was shown on Air Force One. The highest branches of the military saw it. It toured the country at colleges, and it changed laws, and it changed the mindset, and it just completely busted open what was going on in the military. And then from that, as if that wasn't enough, when they took it to campuses, kids on campus said, "What about us? There's rape happening on campus." And the next film they made was called The Hunting Ground, which again was nominated, or did it win a few years later. So a documentary film about this has a potential, if done properly, to change things, to, you know, pull down the curtain and let people see what's really going on.
With CPS nationwide.
Exactly. It would be, you know, a very eye-opening experience. And Vince, maybe you can address this to our audience, but I know that some states have, I've only practiced in California, but I know that some states have juries in these proceedings. And I wonder how that makes a difference, because when the judges are being watched and when the rulings are being scrutinized, I mean, it's got to have some impact on the process, I would imagine.
Yes. And you know, there are a lot of, well, it hasn't been in the news lately, but several years ago, there was a lot of talk about letting the press inside CPS courtrooms. Now, I didn't know this, but because I wasn't really a history buff, but you know, one of the main checks and balances of this country from the very beginning has always been the press.
Right. That's right.
And in juvenile dependency courts for a long time, the press is or was forbidden. So basically what you ended up, we had these secret courtrooms, right? Nobody knew what was going on, and it was against the law to even talk about it, right? So it was kind of like, you know, the old Star Chamber, you know, what was going on in England, you know, in the medieval times.
That's how it feels sometimes to this day.
And you know what? People left England and came to this country, or left Europe and came to this country because they wanted to get away from that. Yeah. And here we are, we have a system that's secret. And, you know, there was a judge, a presiding judge, I won't mention his name, but he tried to change that several years ago. He made some inroads, but he was checked at a lot of different levels. I'll give you an example. He wanted to change a rule. I forgot what rule it was, but it was something that you would think would be fair for everyone. And from what I heard was, now he didn't tell me this, but what I heard was that the federal government the Department of Health and Human Services, he contacted him or contacted the state of California and said, okay, you guys going to change that law? Well, if you do, we're going to stop all funding to your state. What do? Well, that bill or that law got thrown into the trash can. So a lot of times it's just, the judges want change, or they wish they could change, or they try to change things, and they're stopped.
Yeah.
Because of different levels of bureaucracy. I tell people all the time, hey, you want to make a change? Get a bunch of your friends together and go vote. Right? Yeah. In California, judges are elected, or if they're appointed, they have to face re-election every 6 years. If you're not happy with the judge, you can complain about it, but I mean, the only thing you can do is go out and vote. Vote him or her out of office, put your own candidate up, but nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of energy and a lot of groundswell, and it's hard. It's a difficult system to topple. I'm not at liberty to really talk about it too much, but I know that there is somebody who's working on a project related to a film about dependency law, and they attempted to go into LA County, and they got permission. They did it all properly. They got permission through presiding, and they got permission of the parties that they had access to, and they wanted to film the proceedings. And of course, they would have kept it confidential and blurred faces as necessary. And when they showed up, the objecting party was the county. The judge was fine, the other parties were fine, but the county objected, county council. And so they were not allowed to film. And that's the last time I saw somebody try to get into one of these courtrooms. I mean, I had an experience this morning that was somewhat maddening. I represent some grandparents, and I wanted to make a motion for standing. And I had to literally push the court just for her to hear my motion. Her attitude and position was very similar to, what are you doing in this courtroom, and you will not speak. And I'm an attorney who's come to make a motion. So I can only imagine if they had been underrepresented and they're just the grandparents and they want to say something, which, by the way, they have the right to do. Mm-hmm. They can and have the right to be heard. And there's no way they could have navigated the courtroom this morning. I barely did, and I was pushing.
Right.
So I can't imagine for the average person they would have gone through.
A couple of days ago, I was talking to someone in Northern California in a county, and they were complaining about the judge who was doing a lot of the dependency cases. And I told them, I said, in another county, a group of parents got together and started a recall on judges, on a couple of judges in that county. Now, I didn't really know what it took to recall a judge. I just, something that you don't talk about, you don't think about. But I started researching in it, and it's not as hard as you think. And in that county, what happened was this lady and her supporters, a lot of mad parents, got enough signatures in that county to place the recall for a vote, an official vote. And I think I spoke to this woman, and she told me that the judges ended up resigning. And I don't know if this is correct, but this is what she told me, because they don't want to face the recall, because if they lose, apparently that has some effect on their pension or benefits or something like that.
Interesting.
So if you get enough signatures, the strategy is, you get it on the ballot, and then if they resign, the election, that special recall election goes away. It's the same way. There's a big movement. I don't know if it's died or what, but there was a big movement to recall Governor Newsom.
No, it's still going on.
Okay, so the station where I have my radio show, there is a radio show devoted to the recall of Governor Newsom. Now, I'm not saying I support it or don't support it. I'm just saying, and I went to their website. You wouldn't believe how sophisticated this thing is. And they have people all over the state getting these signatures. And, I guess recently, the governor, is starting to take this seriously. This is getting, getting
That's
to the
point. If there are enough people stomping their feet, there's going to be some recognition of it.
Right, but you got to be organized.
Organized.
And what happens in these CPS cases, people aren't organized, right? They're pissed off, and their main outlet is, social media or the internet. Well, that's not going to really do anything.
That's right.
I tell people all the time, you want to make a change? Vote. Vote for your legislators so they can change laws, make family-friendly laws. Vote for your judges, the ones that you support, the ones that you don't support, vote them out of office.
And tell your friends. Judges in smaller counties, there's not that many people voting for judges, you know, and they look to you because you've had some court experience, or you're a lawyer, or you're a court reporter, a court officer. They ask you, hey, who should I vote for judge?
Right. Friends ask me that. Friends ask me that all the time, and I tell them, I don't know. I don't know this man or woman.
Yeah.
You know what their response is?
Speaking of laws, you know what law I'd really love to see? Body cameras for social workers. They should have to wear body cameras. And especially when interviewing children and parents. Nobody's allowed in the interview with a child when a social worker comes out. What's the first thing they do? They send, hey, mom, can you go in the kitchen? We're going to go down the hall.
Right.
And it's a frightening thing for a parent to face that.
Right.
And how many times do we hear in our cases that, sometimes the parents are eavesdropping, so they hear what really happened, and then they read in the report and it's entirely different.
Right.
Or they don't hear, and the child is alleged to have said something that, the parent knows they didn't say. So, I mean, I feel like that could be something that could get done. I feel like there's a hope for that one.
There was a bill that was proposed. I don't know how long ago it was, but you can read it on the Cal legislative website. And it was sponsored by a couple of assembly people. I think one guy from the Bay Area, one guy from like Kern County or something like that. And what it said was, you as an individual, if you're ever confronted by a CPS worker, that you would have the right to record them. You wouldn't need their permission. It would be like a special exception to the recording statutes.
The problem I see with that, because I would agree with that. If you're out if they come to your home, you certainly have a right to film in your own house. If it's out on the street, you have a right to film in public. They'll see you're filming, so it's not clandestine, so it's not illegal. The problem is when our clients have tried to do that, as you know, the social workers say, I refuse to be filmed, and they leave. And then the report reads, parent was attempting to film me against my will, and they were not cooperating.
Right.
They refused to turn off the camera.
Hey, by the way, do you know any statute that says they have to cooperate with the social worker?
There's no you must cooperate statute, no.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
A few years ago, I was in a judge's chamber, and the county council was, wah. And Davis's client won't cooperate. And by the way, Davis instructed her not to cooperate. The judge turned and looked at me. What, is that true, Mr. Davis? I said, it certainly is. And the judge says to me something like, well, we're supposed to be working here cooperating. I said, well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm here defending my client. Right? And that didn't go over well.
Mhm.
But
They don't
know.
want an adversarial process from us. But never mind that they're taking your child away. And that's not supposed to be perceived as adversarial. I mean, it's
probably the worst thing that could happen to a person.
I think so.
You
Yeah.
probably, I don't know, you probably don't know this about Cynthia, but Cynthia had a CPS case a few years ago where her children were taken, and the foster parent was, doing a job on her.
Yeah, as they do.
And very close to adoption. And she was interviewing lawyers, looking for a lawyer. Not a dime to her name. And she came to my office, and the attorney that was supposed to meet with her that day wasn't there. So, they called me in my office and said, hey, there's a potential new client. Will you come meet with her? Okay. I don't think I ever told you this, Cynthia. The fact that I met with you was an accident. So I go in the conference room and I listened to her story, and it was such a sad story. And, we got around talking about the money, and she said, I don't have any money, right? I can't pay you. I lost my job, whatever. And I sat there thinking, I said, if I don't help this lady, she's never going to get her kids back. There's going to be no way. We represented her. Denise, the other Denise, was assigned to the case from my office. And she basically worked some magic and got the kids back to her. Now, I'm talking about this close from adoption. This close. And why does it take me or my firm or you, someone like you, Denise, to come in and do this case?
Yeah. It shouldn't take that. It just shouldn't.
But it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. When I started doing panel work, court-appointed work, decades ago, and I thought over time people would get pissed off and laws would be reformed. Do you know that today parents are worse off in a dependency case than they were back in the 1980s, early 90s?
Yeah. They added the 6-month cutout. They added.
Well, here's the big thing that was changed, and I think it happened like in about 89, somewhere when Clinton was president. You couldn't terminate a parent's right unless you had a whole separate proceeding under Civil Code, or the old Civil Code 232.
232.
Right.
Yeah. A free from. We called them free froms.
Right. Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Today, you could lose your parental rights like that.
You can, if you do not play your cards right, and your child is taken in the system under 3 years old,
right,
you can lose your child in exactly 10 months. 10 months. Right?
Right.
And that isn't how it used to be. They changed that law with the 3-year-old and the 6-month cutout. And that's not parent friendly. That's not family friendly.
I have my own ideas why they changed the laws. What's your opinion?
Oh, I can't even imagine. I think probably just to keep the sinister me, it's to move things along, to keep it rolling, to just stop spending money on people that are not getting their kids back right away and push them into adoption.
That's right. You see, before, when they had 232 and not 366.26 to terminate rights, you could get a guardianship ordered fairly easily.
We did a lot of guardianships in the past, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here
Right.
was the problem. They would have to pay the guardian, usually grandma, every month until the kid turned 18. And the federal government said, wait a minute, that's too much money, right? Let's cut them off early, let them be adopted, and then we're going to give them about 2 years of adoption assistance. We're going to pay for 2 years. After that, we're going to cut you off. Now, one of the things, and I still get these calls, foster parent who adopts a child calls me 2-3 years after the adoption and says, hey, I want to sue the county. Why? Well, they told me I'd be getting paid for the rest of the kids, minor life until they were 18. And they cut me off after 3 years. And I want to sue for fraud or breach of contract. The problem is there's a document that they sign acknowledging that adoption assistance can be cut off. Now, it's one of those documents, you're just signing stuff away, when the social workers are, here, sign this. Okay, blah, blah,
If you're adopting a child, you're happy you're not reading the fine print.
Right. You're getting the tax break, all that stuff. You're going to get money, you think you're going to get money until they're 18, but you don't know that it's going to be cut off.
Hey, Vince, we have some questions if you want to
Sure.
get those.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, can you both state where you're located for the people listening?
Go ahead,
Sure.
Denise.
I'm in San Diego, California.
Okay, Vince.
I'm in Arcadia, California, in Los Angeles County. Arcadia is right next to Pasadena.
How can I find an attorney to help me with my case? I can't find any lawyers to help. They are afraid of CPS and none of them want to take them on even with new evidence.
Denise?
Well, depends where you are, of course. But so first you want to look in your own community and see if there's somebody there. You can check with your local local bar association. They often know and have good referrals for you. They may refer you to somebody in family law, and usually somebody in family law knows some people in dependency law. So this area, the law is called dependency or juvenile law. And if you can't find anybody in that route, you can always check with the state bar for your state. And then I have to say, Vince Davis has been practicing for so long. He knows a lot of people all over the country. We practice through the work that I do with Vincent, and Vince's office practices up and down the state of California. So just because he's based in Arcadia and I'm in San Diego, we cover cases from Southern California to Northern California and all over in the East counties. So you can always call, I think, Vince Davis's office, and he might be able to refer you to somebody in your area. And that could include even out of state. I think he has a pretty deep list. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vince, but.
No, you're correct. You're correct. My telephone number is right under my picture. You probably don't know this, Denise, but I'm doing a case right now in Oregon.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So we could reach far if we have to.
And there's also a website that we just started.
I was going to say it. Go ahead,
Cynthia,
Vince.
what's the name of the website?
CPSAttorneyRolodex.com.
And we're trying to get people, attorneys to, go on there and list their name and their information, because, I get a lot of calls, from Maine, from Texas, from Oklahoma, from, Wyoming. Hey, Mr. Davis, do you know anybody in my state?
Yep. And if you're listening to this discussion right now and you've had a good experience with your attorney, then, call in and offer their name as well.
Yes.
Right.
So we can build the list for the next mom or dad that comes along that needs somebody.
Yes.
What's the next question?
The next question. My stepson is in foster care and his father is in prison. I've tried to get foster placement of him, but they denied me behind BS. I'm not sure. I had a family member who liked to call the child welfare on me, but all the calls were screened out. I'm trying for adoption now, but we feel like the worker for the kids has her own agenda. I have an attorney, but what can I do at this point?
What state are they in? Or they didn't say?
They don't state.
Okay, Denise, assume that they're in California. What would you advise?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what I heard from that question is this is a step parent trying to adopt the stepson because the father, the natural father, is in jail or in prison.
Correct.
And the social worker is not assisting.
Correct.
So I think that the adoption by that person is a good idea. I mean, I don't know if they currently have placement with them. So if they do, then they're on the right track. They're doing the right thing. Stick with it. Don't let the social worker get you down. You know, keep doing what you need to do and move towards that adoption. I like the idea of an adoption, Vince, a separate adoption action, a step parent adoption. That's a very creative, good way to go. Assuming the child is not a dependent. The fact pattern was a little off. So what are your thoughts, Vince?
They do not have placement of the child, by the way.
Oh, okay.
But is it a CPS case?
It doesn't even state that.
If they're not a CPS case, then a step parent adoption seems like a good way to go.
I think the only reason I would say yes, it is a CPS case is that they said that they're talking about the social worker and the child being in foster care. So that's why I'm assuming it is a CPS case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a tricky situation, right, Vince? Because they're not the placement. They're step parents, so they have certain rights. What are your thoughts?
You know, if they're in California, they're going to have to take a step like filing a de facto, filing a 388, filing a petition to disclose records, you know, something along those lines. And one of the things I do, Denise, and I get criticized all over the state for doing stuff like this, is I file a petition for guardianship, temporary and permanent guardianship, inside the CPS court. Now, I don't have a lot of success with that move, but I do have a little, you know, but generally if my petition or my 388 petition doesn't work, I've also started doing this, and I know this is really big down in San Diego because I got this idea a couple of years ago from somebody in San Diego. I file a petition for presumed parent status. Oh, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
and you don't have to be the father. You can be either way now, which is great. No,
you could be, you know, some guy down the street. But what I get a lot of times is, you know, grandma calls me and says, hey, they took the kid from my daughter, but I was really raising the kid since birth. Voila. You sound like a presumed parent. You sound like a person that should have standing in the juvenile court with the rights of a parent. And I don't know if they're still doing this down in San Diego.
I haven't seen that one, but I like it.
but for a time, what they were doing, and it was taking up so much time, they would have the presumed parent hearing / trial before you could do the JD, the jurisdictional and dispositional hearing.
This is true.
Because you needed to find out if that person was truly a presumed parent.
Sure. You have to have it first, of course, right?
Right.
Because if they win, then they're a participant through the rest of the juris and dispo.
Right.
And they have certain rights at the disposition.
Right.
So that's a really good tactic. I like that. Yeah, I don't see why that couldn't work in some situations.
Next question, Cynthia.
I need to find out if my child has been adopted by the foster parent. How do I do that? They legally took my daughter from day one. I didn't know anything about the law, and my husband had just passed away of 15 years, which is her father. I was in devastated state of mind. I hired an attorney that did nothing but stand by, I don't know, It doesn't make sense. I apologize. While he knew they were lying in court and I had paperwork to prove it.
Well, initially I would say you should probably contact your attorney to find out if your child has been adopted. I'm sure he or she would be able to tell you that. What do you think, Denise?
Well, certainly that's a good place to start, but if they were kind of not non-functional, then they might not be able to get much information out of them. You can get records, certain records as a parent at juvenile court. You are entitled to inspect the records. Certainly in California, you can. And so you might just go to the court itself and ask, make sure you have your proper identification so you can identify yourself. And if you have your child's birth certificate or something that identifies them as well. And you maybe can look at the minute orders and see what the last minute orders show, because that, of course, if they were adopted, that would be one of the last minute orders. And then at the end of the day, you can also make a motion. There are motions to seek records of the juvenile court. You have to have a good reason for it. It's a petition. It's called an 827 petition. It's just a court form that you can download online, and you can petition to look at the records of your child. And a judge will look at your request, and if you have good cause to look at those records, they will grant the petition.
I concur. Next question, Cynthia?
Yes, 1 second. I'm looking. Josh wants to know if it's rare that a court-appointed attorney files an appeal.
I would say it depends on the court-appointed attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, mainly because the appeal isn't, if you have a court-appointed attorney, it's likely that you might get a court-appointed appellate attorney. So, in California, filing a notice of appeal is just a 1 or 2 page document, with your name on it when you sign it. So I don't know if I would say that it's rare. It's, on a case-by-case basis, and you have to talk to your attorney. If you want to file an appeal, you should make, request or demand that your court-appointed attorney file that appeal. Now, there is an exception when you file a notice of intent to file a writ when your family reunification services are done or terminated. Denise, I don't know if you know this, but the trial attorney is responsible for filing that writ.
I do know that.
So, if you have a court-appointed attorney,
why the 388 can be such a beautiful mechanism.
Maybe, the attorney might be hesitant because he or she has to do the work. Maybe not.
Yeah.
A lot of court-appointed firms have, a writ specialist to take care of cases like that, right? Mm-hmm. So it just depends on a case-by-case basis. If you think you have an appeal, you better make sure the notice of appeal is filed and you get a court-appointed appellate attorney. Next question.
And it's also very important to just want to add this. If you are in a hearing, something doesn't go the way you want, you and your attorney decide you're going to do an appeal, file for an appeal, you have to do it quickly. There are timelines, and they matter, and they happen very fast. So you don't want to sit on it for 1 or 2 months and think about it. If you're going to do it, you have to do it, and you have to do it within 30 days. For a writ, it's only, 7 to 10 days? I think it's 7 days for a writ.
Yeah.
And so for an appeal, it's just 30. So you really have to do it quickly.
All right, Cynthia?
Yes. If CPS can use your past against you of more than 30 years, somebody had that happen and they adopted her granddaughter out against her will because they used their past against her.
Go ahead, Denise.
That's just a really tough situation. I mean, it happens. That's why you have to have a good attorney. And I'm not saying that because that's what we do, but that's why you have to, get on top of it quickly and get somebody who can help you, because they will do that. I just litigated, this case has been going on for a year, where a grandmother wanted to have the baby in her home. She got the baby in her home. at birth. The baby was there for 4 months, and they had approved her on an emergency basis. And they come knocking on the door, and they took the baby out of her arms. And the baby has not been there now for 1.5 years, but she's been fighting it. They took it based on her past history that was upwards of 30 years old. And it was because when she filled out the form to get approved for being the caretaker, there were lapses in her memory from 30 years ago. Things they were 30 years ago. She was young, she had a past, was not horrific, but it was a past. And they removed the child. Well, we took it to, we challenged it in the RFA department. That's the Resource Family approval system here in California. We took it to the administrative law judge. We had a 4-day hearing. We had a ton of witnesses. We were looking at records from the 1980s that were, photographed and photocopied and microfiche. You could barely read what was on them. It was a tough trial, and we won. The judge said, this is not right. This is a decent woman. Her life has changed for the past 10 years, and they overturned it. And so now we're back in the trial court trying to get that relative placement. So they will do that. And it's a tragedy, and it shouldn't happen. And you need to get help right away, because the time frames are limited in dependency. Everything's on a time frame, and it moves pretty quickly.
I'm partial to grandparents. I don't know if you know this, Denise. I was raised by my grandparents. And, it always is, pulls that heartstring when a grandmother calls me and says, hey, they won't give me the grandchild, or they took the grandchild away from me. And it's usually, not all the time, sometimes it's serious, but it's usually some weird reason, like, what you just said. You didn't disclose what happened 30 years ago. I don't think I can remember what happened 30 years ago.
And people just forget what happened.
Right. And people just assume, oh, you went to court and you had a conviction. I can tell you right now that I can't remember things 30 years ago.
I had a call the other day where the relative was trying to get placement of the child, and it was a mom, so a grandma, and they asked her about her relationship with the daughter, the mother, that's the part of the petition. And when the grandma said, well, I'm close with my daughter, I love her, I want her to get her child back, they said, we can't place with you, you're too aligned with the mother.
Right.
Now, if anybody says that to you, you need to get a lawyer and you need to fight that. That is not accurate. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's okay for you still to love your child if they're stuck in the dependency system, and to support your child, your adult child, if they're in the dependency system. That's okay.
I once had a case, and this is many years ago, where something like that happened. And one of the things I argued is, the fact that you love your daughter is not a reason to keep the child away from you, because if it was, the legislature would have listed that as a reason. And I said, it's not even part of the policies and procedures of DCFS or CPS to keep a child away from you. Generally, because you love your daughter. Generally, they use those types of excuses when they really don't want to say why they don't want to give you the child.
That's right.
And
they're not legitimate reasons.
Right. I've told this story before. I once did a trial and I represented the grandmother, who happened to be Jamaican and lived in New York. And I was cross-examining the social worker on why she would not agree to place the child with the grandmother. Now, this is back, during the cocaine days. And I finally asked the lady, after trying to cross-examine her, and she was doing a very good job. And I finally asked her, I said, look, tell me the real reason why you are not going to give these kids to the grandmother. She kind of looked at me like, okay, MF, I'm going to really tell you the real reason. And she looked around the courtroom, right? And she says, well, the real reason is because she's Jamaican and everybody knows Jamaicans are drug dealers.
Hmm.
The judge, because this was a long involved trial and, we were, battling it out. The judge stood up and just walked off the bench.
Oh, that's how mad they were.
Just walked off the bench. Now, this was, early on in my dependency careers, and I didn't realize what a great lawsuit that was against this social worker in the county, right?
Yeah.
So when the judge did come back, and it was maybe 45 minutes, an hour.
Yeah.
He comes back and he says something to the effect like, okay, I've calmed down or something like that. And he ruled that the children would be sent to the grandmother in New York. But, workers, they're human beings. I told somebody this the other day. Whenever you have human beings involved in something, there's going to be prejudice, discrimination, corruption. That's how human beings are, right?
Their own triggers, their own issues.
And I do want to mention this. I don't want to tell you that every social worker is bad, because that's not true. I've met honest, hardworking, family-oriented social workers.
Absolutely.
But I've also met the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you don't know the reason. People tell me, well, why won't they give me the kid? I don't know. They're not going to share that with you. They're not going to share it with me. Maybe it's because they don't like you. You have black hair and blue eyes. Maybe it's because of your race or nationality. Maybe it's because of your religion. Maybe they just like the foster parent. Who knows the real reason? They come to court and say that BS about, oh, you were arrested 30 years ago and you forgot to tell us about that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right.
I try to tell my clients when they tend, they're so distraught and they loop on why. And if you're going to get caught in that, you're going to go crazy, because as you just said, Vince, we don't know why. And at the bottom line, frankly, I don't care why. I want to know if they're following the law and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And as long as, I counsel my clients very closely so that they know what they should and should not do when interacting with a social worker, because it can be very dangerous to talk to a social worker. And beyond that, we do what we're supposed to do, and don't get lost too much in what their motive is, because you're never going to know. Just make sure that they're following the law, they're doing it right, and if they're not, we hold them accountable for it. Yeah.
Cynthia, let's do a couple more questions.
Okay, just letting you know it is 8 o'clock, and I know that we've been trying to do this in an hour.
Okay, let's just do one more question then.
Okay. If they can make a service plan mandatory without being adjudicated first. I have not even been adjudicated, as the first hearing was extended due to the state not having enough evidence, but the judge still took my children, saying basically erring on the side of caution, and next hearing is not till the beginning of June for adjudication hearing.
Oof. What state is that, do they say?
No.
Assume that it's California. What would you say?
Okay. First of all, there's a 10-day rule, and I wonder who waived time all the way to June on an adjudication. That's my first thought. Mm-hmm. That's just, like I said, there are timelines, and you don't want to blow through them grossly. Sometimes we have reason that, the calendar's full, so it's not going to be in 3 weeks, it's going to be in 4. That's acceptable. But for an adjudication to be all the way out in June, to me, that's a little bit of a problem. I'd probably want to hear more about that. But in terms of being ordered to do a reunification plan prior to juris is not legitimate. Normally what a court should do is they can order the department to offer you those services. They can say, department, you will give them referrals, you will give them low or no cost drug programs and therapy. And services they can follow up on. But before jurisdiction, they are really voluntary for the parent to engage in. They should not be making orders for it. Some courts do, and certainly if the children are detained with you, the court can make it conditional on certain things. But in general, there should not be orders like that before juris. Now, whether or not you want to do them voluntarily is a whole different discussion. But in terms of the order or not, it's not valid to give an order.
On a couple of occasions, a court at the detention hearing, at the very first hearing, orders that the parent do drug testing. And in one case, the judge ordered that they do drug testing, including a hair follicle. So I object. And the judge kind of looks at me like, you know, are you kidding? I said, with all due respect, Your Honor, you know, I don't think you have jurisdiction to order a drug test until after dispo. Now, they can offer him that service and he can take it or not take it, but I don't believe the court has jurisdiction. Then I said, on top of that, Your Honor, with all due respect, I think hair follicle tests are unconstitutional in California. And, you know, she kind of looked at me, kind of surprised, maybe, I don't know. And, you know, we had a discussion about that. So the law in California is a judge can try to order you to do a hair follicle. But if you don't object, and if your attorney doesn't object, you got to do it. But if you object, no go. Just urinalysis or the patch, especially before the court takes jurisdiction. Now, just like Denise said there at the very end, that doesn't mean you and your attorney should strategize that you're not going to take the drug test. It might be beneficial for you to take the drug test to prove to the judge at the disposition hearing that you're not using illegal substances. So there's, you know, the whole law part of that, and then there's the whole strategy part of that, which can be different.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, Cynthia.
I think we're done for tonight.
All right.
Yes, it's 8:10. I know we've tried to keep this at an hour. So Denise, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we have all of your information so that if people want to contact you, they can. Vince, thank you for joining us also.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you, Denise.
Yes.
Thank you
Okay,
both.
guys. Have a great night.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.